Joined now by Tim Watts of BamaOnline, and a lot going on in the world of Alabama football, though there are no official announcements. Well, really ever. Like, was Ryan Grubb ever announced as Alabama's OC? He's not been announced as Seattle's OC either, but it sure seems like he's gone.
Well, Grubb announced himself as Alabama's offensive coordinator, okay. And I think, there was a lot of speculation. This week he was speaking to Red Elephant clubs. I heard and talked to people that attended the events. I mean, Kalen DeBoer introduced him as Alabama's offensive coordinator. People met him and shook his hand. It became official Wednesday when he walked up, stood in Alabama gear, and said, "I'm Ryan Grubb. I'm your offensive coordinator." And that was the big Red Elephant Club, 2,000-plus members in Bryant-Denny Stadium. Absolutely a big signing day thing every year. So he announced himself at that moment. So you kind of thought maybe this was behind him. You thought maybe the staff was settled in because there had been a lot of discussion because he hadn't changed his social media. And again, I mean, you and I discussed this off the air. I'm not sure that was a big clue because I'm not sure he's a guy that really cares much about social media, but he was the only coach that didn't do it. So there was questions being asked. And, Friday night out of the blue, he shows up, having dinner with the Seahawks head coach and I think the GM. So, I mean, all of it just kind of broke loose really fast. And to make it even more difficult to track, they were all on vacation because after Wednesday, when signing day was done, Kalen DeBoer and the staff were off, I think until midday tomorrow, around lunch maybe. So they were all spread out across the country. And some of those guys are moving their stuff from Seattle. So him being in Seattle wasn't a huge deal because I'm sure other staff members are there, packing because a lot of that happened quick. And Courtney Morgan's a perfect example of that. He probably had to deal with that. So, long story short, there is nothing official. I expect
so, right. Yeah. And what do we think Kalen DeBoer does? Nick Sheridan, who's been with him at multiple stops, was with him at Indiana, was with him at Washington. He's listed as the co-OC or was the co-OC at Washington and the tight ends coach. Nick's been a play caller at Indiana before. Would he get a shot, or would it be maybe somebody a little more experienced? Like we just saw Ohio State hire freaking Chip Kelly to call plays.
Yeah, you never know who's available anymore, right? You have a head Division I Power 5 coach going to be and probably a really good move for Kelly also to go over there and be the offensive coordinator at Ohio State. I think it's still up in the air, but I did read somewhere where the Alabama athletic director said they knew this was a possibility. I'm almost positive his name was going to pop up in that UCLA head coach. I think that Grubb was going to, if he was in Tuscaloosa, I figured this would be a one-year stint anyways, because he was going to have a lot of attention and a lot of eyes on him. But the thing, like we had to do a lot of research. I did when Kalen DeBoer was hired. I didn't know a lot about the Washington coach. Not a lot of SEC Southern connections. Knew him from Indiana a little bit. Knew him at Washington what he did. But when I started digging into it, I mean, the one thing is talking to coaches that know who he is, coaches that have coached with him, they all described him as the the offensive, madman,
mastermind, yeah.
Yeah, he's the mastermind. That's a good way to put it. So they all talked about him being the genius behind the offense. So he was getting all that credit to begin with. That's not to take anything away from Ryan Grubb because I think his reputation precedes him. You can see the interest that he's drawn. He obviously did a good job. But when they described Kalen DeBoer, it was pretty similar to when they talked Alabama defense all these years and Nick Saban. It's his system. It's always going to be his system, and it feeds off of him. So what he does from here, I think he's got a lot of options. I think Sheridan is one. I think you're going to hear some popular names pop up. But to know he had some sort of plan based on what the athletic director said, then I think that he, he's not starting at square one. Very similar to Kalen DeBoer getting hired in 41 hours or whatever it was. They're not starting at the first stage.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough look. And I would use, if I'm, an Auburn coach or a Georgia coach, I'm going to use it against them because the timing of the Grubb Seattle leak came out as the transfer portal window was closing. And I think I don't know that would have changed much because Alabama players have been in class for however many weeks now. So if you were going to leave, you're going to leave in the spring anyway. But it is the timing was icky on that one. And if you knew and it was already going to happen, you should have just let it happen.
Yeah, but I think when you're dealing with college coaches, you're dealing with semantics, right? I mean, if somebody came out and said, well, I was the Alabama offensive coordinator on Wednesday and I got the offer on Thursday. So, again, that's semantics. I mean, the the greatest coach in history stood right in front of a crowd of reporters and said, "I won't be the next Alabama coach." Right. So, I mean, when it gets to college coaches, when it gets to any kind of coach in any profession, I mean, it's just all bets are off. Now, I don't know the details of how this went down, and I don't know if we'll ever know them. But I think that, Alabama knew it was a possibility that he was going to be a big name. Grubb was somebody who's going to be a big name, and people were going to come after him, and he was going to have opportunities. But yeah, it's an SEC. Speaking on that, it doesn't matter what you do. They're going to hit you with your haircut, or the girl you dated in high school, your 7th grade Halloween costume. So that's certainly fair game.
Yeah, everything's fair game in SEC recruiting, sure. And that's something that Kalen DeBoer's got to get used to. How do you think he did that first time around? It's it's a different situation where you're not trying to sign a bunch of guys in February. They did get Ryan Williams, which is a huge get, but they this was a lot of laying groundwork for the class of 2025. What are some of the reports in from the high school coaches, from the people who've gotten to meet him?
Well, you also got Noah Carter, who is the top player in Arizona, one of the best players in the country. I mean, a guy that fits in defensively with what they want to do. Had signed with Washington, got out of his letter of intent, and came to Alabama. And I'll tell you what, you got to be able to recruit a little bit to get kids from Washington, Austin Mack, the center, the wide receiver. Those guys moved across the country to play for them. So you got to know a little bit about recruiting, and recruiting is just building relationships, right? And well, the NIL that factors in now. It's relationships and that kind of stuff. But the early reviews or the junior days were good. They got a really good crowd in. It was kind of West Coast heavy, which you would expect, because those are the guys they're most familiar with. I really think them and the people that cover Alabama was trying to get through that Friday at midnight. I think I had a clock running it down, to get there. Portal's shut. That's the next step. Quiet February. It's dead recruiting. To get there, take your time off and start setting up the future for the 25 class. I still think that's their goal. They still have a lot of people that know the area and players they're going to target, but they've got a lot of evaluation to do. But early reports were good. And again, like you said, they landed Ryan Williams. I mean, Kalen DeBoer was hired on Friday. Monday, Ryan Williams was on campus. He's that was kind of the guy they had to get. And I think getting him, Bama fans took a big breath. There was relief in getting Ryan Williams. Had he not went there and then they lose, Grubb to the NFL, I think there'd be a mass panic.
Well, so we were talking about this last week, Tim, the Alabama win total already out on FanDuel. Now, it obviously can change as the months go by, but 9.5, it's the lowest one since 2016, which I was surprised. I thought it'd be lower than I didn't remember it being that low in 16 when, they were coming off losing Derrick Henry, Jake Coker, Kenyon Drake, all those guys, and tons of guys on defense. But how do you feel about that number? It's weird to see because it's usually double digits.
Yeah, I mean, it's right on the verge of double digits. I mean, you look at the schedule they've got. You've added Texas, you've added Oklahoma. Alabama has a tough schedule next year, so that was already a number. I don't care if Nick Saban was there or not. That was not – you weren't looking at an undefeated, guaranteed season with that schedule that they have. And other SEC schools are certainly going to be able to say the same thing. But I think that's a fair number. I think the number is 9 to 10 wins when you look at the schedule and the talent coming back. It's hard for me to really know exactly what this team's going to be because it's not a finished team. I mean, you still have a portal in April. And again, it's a portal in and a portal out. So you could have guys leaving, you could have guys coming in. It could change the dynamics. Because you look at the portal guys they brought in now, they've got a kid that was looking to be an all Pac-12 type caliber wide receiver, then wide receiver number 1 for Washington next year. They got a Pac-12, all Pac-12 center that came in. So they've got some guys that came in who were talented. So they're able to add more in that April portal. Again, we don't even know who's in the April portal, right? But my guess is April's when the BS stops because you're going to have to show your depth chart to some degree. In December, you can say, oh, you're going to start in April. But if you're not in April, if you're third team cornerback, third team wide receiver in April, those are going to be the guys. Even second team are going to be looking to, to make a move probably.
Well, and what's interesting about it now is because of the SEC rule where you can't go to another SEC school and play next year, it changes who's shopping and where. Like Alabama's probably a program that's shopping. We know Auburn's shopping for a quarterback. We know There's a couple other SEC programs that are still in shopping mode, but they've got to probably shop from the Big Ten or shop from the Big 12 or the ACC. Meanwhile, we know Michigan is a big shopper right now. They've got a couple spots that they need to fill. And that's a place that I would imagine, even if you're at a top line SEC team, you might think about that.
Yeah, I'm also wondering how many of those Michigan players will go out shopping themselves. I mean, they've lost head coach, led them to national championship. They've lost a huge amount of seniors that they're familiar with, their teammates. They've
Whole
lost
defensive staff.
Yeah, 5 assistant coaches so far. So they should be some guys looking to get out. And you saw that with Alabama with Caleb Downs, when the guys he knew the closest, the people that he was the closest with, from coordinator to position to the head coach, and then he went off and took off once Saban retired. There's going to be kids on that team that are very loyal to Jim Harbaugh, that went to play for Jim Harbaugh. Nothing against the current coaches at Alabama or Michigan, but those, that's Jim Harbaugh is a big name. So there could be guys looking too. So they're going to have a lot of battles. And then you got UCLA jumped in the mix. They got guys that could be looking to get out, and they're probably going to be shoppers too. So there's a lot that's going to happen in April, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it's Pete Nakos has been trying to tell us for weeks that it's going to be wild in April. I always thought that the SEC rule kind of tamps it down a little bit, because I feel like most SEC players want to play for an SEC school, and that settles things. Yeah. But I don't know. I mean, with the level of quality of some of these programs outside the SEC that need stuff, it does feel like it might not just be a Bear Alexander type this year.
In this situation with that in the SEC, I think you're looking at more people going after the SEC's players. Obviously, the most talented conference. SEC's got less to pull from, right? They're already the ones with the most talent. So they're going to still be able to cherry pick, and the top guys will still get people. But also, you got to look at how set are the rosters. You got to think some of these guys are pretty close to the 85 that they like. So you're going to have to basically cut and add and cut, to keep your number at the 85. You want to have as much depth as possible, but you will have guys. But you make a good point. I mean, kids that grow up in the South tend to want to play for schools in the South. Somebody that could benefit from that is somebody local, like a Georgia Tech, a school that's in
Florida
Atlanta.
State has made a killing off of it.
Florida State, they're probably full of the guys that were, backups at Alabama. They've got several of them over there, but they've added a lot of talent. They could add more. I mean, that's still Florida State. A lot of people remember Florida State, and Clemson's out here saying we're good. And that just, if Clemson were to take portal guys, you would have a ton of interest in that program, right? So that helps Florida State even more. So there's a lot of risk and reward being weighed by programs. I'm curious to see what happens with Clemson. How can they hold up? Because if they can win doing it their way, they prove you can do it. But I just think it's really hard to pull that off.
I don't think you can, because you can win, but I don't think you can win at the level that they used to win, because it's just, you're not as efficient as everybody else. Everybody else can cover their mistakes up much faster, and you have to sort of develop your way out of mistakes. And that's just, it's going to put them in situations like last year in the Florida State game, where if Clemson has one receiver that they'd gotten out of the portal that was a dynamic number one receiver, they probably win that game.
You mean like Keon Coleman? You know what I mean?
Like Keon Coleman.
Yeah, that's definitely a game changer for him. I'm curious to see. I hope they actually can do it and show that some teams can be stable. But again, when you lose a left tackle like Alabama did, if you're Clemson, if you lose that guy, because they'll still lose guys, I'm guessing, to the portal. So if they don't bring any in, that's just like a huge disadvantage to me. But if you do lose that, you kind of feel it. It's almost like it is free agency for college. For football.
Well, in Alabama's situation last year, I thought was interesting on the offensive line, because in the old system before the transfer rules changed, there would have been a center that they could have put in who could have snapped and also blocked effectively. But they didn't feel comfortable putting anybody in behind Seth McLaughlin when he was having issues snapping, because they didn't feel like they could get stuff blocked. And that never would have happened in 2015, 16, 17. But it does now. And that's why I don't know that there's going to be one team that just dominates everybody from now on.
No, I think you're going to have to be super heavy in the NIL, because that's the easiest way to keep people happy, right? If you're paying your backup to stay, that's going to be good motivation for somebody to stay and be patient. But it's going to be expensive to keep that that true freshman who's behind some, good players, and you're trying to convince him to stay another year or two to even have a chance to play. But that's one way to do it. It's just straight up, pay him to stay, pay him to play, pay him to stay. We got a lot we're trying to divvy up.
Is that, I know they say pay to play is against the rules, which the rules may go away soon, but is pay to stay against the rule? I've never heard anybody say anything bad about pay to stay.
I don't really think there's rules, although
I don't think so either.
I mean, the NCAA is trying to enforce rules. I mean, I just like the no pay for play was like, I mean, you knew this was coming. If you're paying the kid to sign with you, that is literally the definition of pay for play. And we knew that would come. I mean, we knew that, the kids would want that to get their fair share. And, for some of these guys, you look at it from the percentage of guys, these players that are going to make it to the NFL small, this might be the best chance to get ahead at life. I mean, if you can, if you can graduate, put it simple, if you can graduate from a college and still have $100,000 in the bank, you're winning. You're winning.
Oh, yeah. Can you imagine Tim graduating college and having the money to put a down payment on a house?
No,
right when he got it would change your financial trajectory for the rest of your life.
And we're talking, everybody focuses on he got $5 million or Nico at Tennessee got $2 million a year or whatever. A lot of these guys are just trying to get through and survive and just get their degree. And I mean, everybody wants to play in the NFL. You and I wanted to play in the NFL or the NBA. Everybody wants to do it. Everybody's not going to have that opportunity. Yeah. But you're right. Free education, no debt, $100,000 in a paid off car. You're winning at 22. You're winning. You're winning.
Unless your old buddy who's trying to transfer to Tulsa and get $80,000 a year. That's
these stories. I'm almost wondering if they're not a little hyperbole, but I believe them.
I don't think that was. I think Kevin Wilson was really reading from a text message from a recruit.
I wanted to think he's trying to make a point, but I believed it. I was like, man, that is crazy. It's just yeah, and hopefully, I still hope these committees can get together and come to some kind of rule agreement, and give players what they're deserved or what you feel they're deserved. And I think that tampering for me, I know we're on a side tangent, but tampering for me is the issue. It's confusing. There's lies being told to get somebody in the portal. I've heard a lot of horror stories, not really in the SEC level, but to get guys into the portal.
Well, let's talk about our unknown player who was trying to transfer to Tulsa.
Right.
Like somebody told him you should get in the portal. You can get this kind of money. You can't get that kind of money at Tulsa. You shouldn't even bother trying. Like somebody lied to you. And no, you're right. And I do think that they're going to come to something, whether it's collective bargaining or something. They got to figure out something that survives an antitrust suit, which would probably be collective bargaining, but that would allow for player movement rules and real transfer rule or real tampering rules that have real penalties. So
I think you can limit the tampering. If you limit the tampering windows, you can't have 8 portal windows. That's 8 tampering windows. I mean, you're gonna have to narrow this down to some bit. I think again, Alabama, Michigan, you go through a coaching change, UCLA. You go through a portal window, you go through the coaching change. That thing was 30 days. Like I was telling people on Thursday and Friday, it's still open. They were like, that can't be possible. I was like, no, for real. It closes Friday at midnight.
Yeah, you could probably get all that action covered in a week. But the problem again with that is you got to get the players. You probably have to get the players to sign off on it, which I think a players union or something like that would. They'd be like, okay, two windows is fine. That's plenty.
Nobody's going to listen to me, but I really think that you give them a 10 to 12, 14-day window after the new coach is named.
Yeah.
Don't let them Kalen DeBoer showed up and you already had guys gone that he never really even got to meet.
Yeah. Give him a chance to have a meeting, say, here's who I am. If you still want to leave, go.
Right. Yeah. Caleb Downs did that. He met the coach. He talked and did what he needed to do and he left. That's the option. They've got a fair option. He can see both sides. But if you don't even know who the coach is, and let's be clear, Alabama's coaching change was in 41 hours. Michigan's was the guy that was already there. All these coaching changes aren't going to take place in 48 hours. Some of them are going to go a week. So you've got a week before the coach is even there. He might show up and not want the job.
Boston College took 9 days.
Yeah. Back 15 years ago, 9 days was nothing. That was a speed record. Today it's forever.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, it's changing fast, and it keeps on changing. Tim Watts, thank you so much.
I appreciate it, Andy.
Thank you so much for watching. Just a reminder, subscribe to this channel right here so you never miss an episode of Andy Staples on 3. And oh, by the way, watch all the other great videos on the On 3 Sports YouTube channel.